Hey there guys, TC Made with TC Game. Wanted to bring you another video in our RPG series tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about something called interfaces. And one of the things that a lot of people use interfaces for, among other myriads of things you can use them for, one of the things is for interacting with something like a treasure chest. They'll use it for an interaction system. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Sketchfab, and we're going to go in and look for downloadable animated and type in the word chest up here, and it should pop up a list. And the way the Sketchfab is here, you can see that they have these little animated icons next to them, and then if it's paid, it's got a little dollar sign. If you scroll down a little bit, there's just a common chest in here. You can go and check that out. Excuse me, it should have the animation in it. As long as we have an animated opening of the chest, we should be good. We can go over here and hit our download 3D model, and we just want to get the FBX, no problem. And once that's downloaded, we can go to chest, show in folder. I usually pop it up this way, and then just say extract files or extract to chest. If we go over to the chest folder, we'll see textures and source, and there's our chest anim FBX. Okay, so we'll leave that folder open, and we're going to close out of Sketchfab. And then we're going to go back into our Unreal Engine project. In our content folder, we're going to right click and set new folder. And I'm just going to call these props. And then I'm going to right click again and say new folder. And I'm going to call this chest. And then I'm going to leave my project here in the background. I've already got this folder open, so I can just go to the chest folder. And let's see if we go to the source and bring this in. Minimize that. You just want to make sure you click import animations. I'm going to reset all this to default and then hit import animations. And then when you come down here, it should say search location local and create new materials. And I will say import all. And you'll get sometimes these little warnings. Now, it looks like it brought the chest in, but it didn't bring in the material assignments for it. If we open this up, you'll see there's nothing on there. The chest does have multiple parts, though. It does have a lid and a base. So that's the box. And then it looks like it has the animation for the top. Yeah, it's flipping open. And is there another FBX in there? There's a skeleton, and there's the animation for the base of it. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll go back over here and we'll get our textures. Go back to source, chest, and then let's pour our textures folder in. And usually these, if you look at these, it's got the names right in here: albedo, AO, which is a I forget what AO stands for. Metallic, normal, and roughness. Ambient occlusion, I think is what that is. But if you go back to your chest now that you have that textures folder in there, a lot of times you can pop the material open and you can go and you can put in, so there's your AO. So you can go in here and you can pull these materials. So I'll just minimize this a little bit. Oops. Wouldn't actually minimize this folder a little bit. Pull up the RPG, get the textures again, and you can just bring a shift click in here and drag all this in here, and they'll bring all those materials in. Open that back up, and you can get rid of this one called param, which is a default that gets made whenever you create something new. So we're just going to kind of pull these out so we can see what we got in here. Just get them spread out a little bit. Okay, so try and sort these out. What is this one here? This is the texture sample. What's this one called? Texture sample there. Alright, so this says albedo, roughness. You can see the names over here, normal. So, roughness. There's a roughness up here. So we'll come out of this into that roughness. So that puts that on there. This one is called albedo. We'll leave that for a sec. This one's called normal. There's a thing here called normal, so we'll come out of this into normal. And then this one's called metallic. We have a metallic up here. So we'll pull this up and we'll come out of here into metallic. And this one is called AO, or ambient occlusion, like we said earlier. So we'll pull this over and drag out of RGB or RGB into ambient occlusion. And that leaves us to figure out where this thing goes. So I'm going to try just plugging it into base color. And I think that may actually do it. So let's hit save. And go back and see if that fixes our chest. Looks like that fixes everything that we needed to fix. I'm not sure if that thing goes, if it's the right spot for that. So you'll do your own independent research on this, and if I'm wrong, you'll let me know, and we'll fix it for everybody. But for the most part, we should be in pretty good shape here. It looks like what we need will be there. Okay, now that's not the scope of this whole tutorial, but we need something to animate this. This on. So let's go and start to create the objects that we actually need. I'm going to go out, excuse me, and just in our content, we have that RPG content folder. We're going to go back to there, and we're going to go and create this thing that's called this is called a interface. Okay, so we're going to right-click and go to Blueprint Classes. I don't know if interfaces come in under here anywhere. I've never really looked for them in here, but I think that the only way that I know how to get to them is if you go to Blueprint Class, and under here you type in interface. Should be not interfacer, but Blueprint Interface. Next, I don't see it in here when I'm typing that. So let's go back here. Let's look again. Maybe I missed it. Blueprints. Blueprint interface is actually under here under blueprints. So blueprint interface, and we're going to call this interact. Interact interface. And then when you open this up, excuse me, there's a spot here where you can have a new function, and we're just going to call this function interact. Now, 95% of the tutorials you see about this will just say, okay, there you go, you've got this thing. Now, I'm going to try and explain it conceptually to you so that we all understand what's going on here. Your interaction here, you can't write any code. You can't create an interact function here. We created a function before. We could create that function right on the character, and we could control that, but that character, that function lived inside of a component that we placed onto that object. This is very similar to that, but in this case, the object is the interface itself. So when we put this interface or reference this interface on our characters or actors or objects or whatever, what it's going to do is inherit the ability to use whatever functions are listed here. But these functions are generic in nature, that there's no code to it. But what it does is it gives you a conduit to write a common function on every object, but specify how it actually works on that object. Now, what does all that mean? Well, what that means is that if I put this interface on and I want to interact with something like a door, if I put this interface on a door, I can check to see if that door implements this interface. And if this door implements this interface, then I know I can interact with it. If I put this on the chest, I know that I can interact with the chest. If I put it on, a couch, I know that I can interact with that couch. So the way that I interact with the door is going to be different than the way that I interact with the chest or the way that I interact with the couch. But commonly, I can just say, can I interact with you? Yes. Okay, since I can, how? What do you want me to do when the interact fires? And you build that portion of the code actually on each individual object that you want to interact with. But instead of having a system where you have to go up to something and say, let me try and interact with you, and oh yeah, I'm sorry, I don't interact with things. You know, you already know it interacts because you can check for the existence of this interaction interface that you're going to build. Hopefully that clears it up a little bit. I know this is so crazy the way that this is set up. It never made sense to me, but there's a lot of other stuff you can do in here too. You can compile these and build, you know, input pins and pass values and stuff, just like we did in the other one, but in this case it's generic. So hopefully that doesn't confuse you. So we're just going to simply build this thing called interact. And now what we can do is we can go out to whatever the object is that we want to interact with and put that interface on it. Like, for example, we had this health cube over here. If I say edit health cube, I could go over here. There's a section in here for under class settings where you can go implemented interfaces and go add one. And I can just type in interact. And there's going to be a interactable interface now. See, my interact interface shows up here. And if I put that on there, I'd be able to interact with this health cube. Now I already have a health cube where it's every time I bump into it, it does something. So I'm not going to do that. We're going to do this actually on the chest like we said earlier. Okay, so let's go ahead and build our chest that we want to interact with. We're going to go back to our props folder, back to our chest folder where we created this earlier. And I'm just going to right click in here and create a blueprint class of type actor. And we're just going to call this chest. We'll call it chests underscore BP. That other name's taken already. So if we go into our chest BP, we can come in here and we can say add. And what we want to add in here is a skeletal mesh component. Now what a skeletal mesh component allows you to do is to put on something that can be animated, and it'll play an anim class in here. But in the generic sense, it's the type of object. It just happens to have a skeleton. If it doesn't have a skeleton, it's referred to as a static mesh. It's something that doesn't move or animate. Now, it doesn't mean you can't move it around in the world. It just means by itself it doesn't have any animations on it. A gun, for example, could be a static mesh if it doesn't have any slide mechanisms or a trigger that moves or anything like that. But typically even a gun is a skeletal mesh because it has a slide or a trigger, or like a bow would be a skeletal animation because when you animate it, you're moving bones that'll create the illusion that the bow's been drawn back, or even the string itself is animated in there. So they have skeleton bones in there to allow you to manipulate the positions of them over a timeline, which creates the illusion of animation. So skeletal meshes are typically used for that. But that's another topic. I just want to kind of point that out. So our skeletal mesh here, the portion of the skeletal mesh, we're going to go over here and grab our chest. There's your chest top and bottom. So we'll grab the bottom portion. And then we'll do back to our default seam root, add another skeletal mesh. And this one will be called skeletal mesh 1 because we didn't rename it. And we're just going to go in here and grab our chest top. And if you look at them over top of each other now, you see that we've rejoined this to create our chest. And if you were to take your top thing here, we can rename this. Let's go rename. We'll call it chest. And you don't have to do this, but I'm just doing it. Chest underscore top. And we'll call this chest underscore bottom. Rename. Chest underscore bottom. And I just did that so that I can tell which one I'm on. And obviously if I click on it, you can see the highlight. But on the chest top, if I were to go to the anim class in here, there is an animation in here for chest. Maybe say, is it open or top? Let's see, top. It doesn't know where it is. Maybe I have to compile it first, let's see. Oh, use, yeah, you have to switch the animation mode to use animation asset. It wasn't looking for animation asset, so there's an animation asset that's associated with this thing. It automatically knows that. And so if I put that in there, you see now that's the top animation to open up the chest. It's just looping through that. And the reason it's looping through that is because if you go to the animation, there's probably a setting in here somewhere where it's set to loop. But that's not again, that's not what we're here for. So I just want to show you that that's why we have that on there to be able to animate this. So I'm going to switch this back off, so use animation blueprint. We're not even going to use that. Okay, that way. Now, in our interaction interface for this, what we can do is, on the class settings for this chest BP, we can go over here to this interfaces and say add, and we're going to go interact interface. And we're going to put that on here. So in the interact interface, if you were to open this up, there's an event interact in here. See, this is automatically, the interface is brought this over, right, from the interact interface. So whenever we interact on this, what do we want it to do? Well, in our case, we're going to want it to open the chest, right? So an easy way to do that would be to play the animation sequences for these. So I think you can actually bring this out and just say play animation sequence, play animation or whatever. And then from the chest bottom has its chest anim for bottom. And you could do the same thing here, pull the chest top out. And just do play animation. And do the same thing here. This is going to do the play for the top. And put that in. Okay, and that's if we interact with this. And really what you want to do a lot of times with these interactions is you really want to come off of here and just say do once, because you don't want to have this thing loop over and over and over and over again. So the do once on here is I can only ever open this chest one time or close it, in this interaction. I don't want to hit interact and have it keep opening the chest, open the chest, open the chest. So we do this. We set that up. Now, how do we get this to fire? Well, we get this to fire by calling this from the interaction interface. So we can do that from our character by asking this chest, hey, do you happen to use the interface for interaction? And if you do, I know that you have this event on you, and I can ask you to go and do that. So this says start close. Let's go compile. And if we brought this out into the world now, the only other thing that we would want to do is that thing looks small. Oh, yeah, it is a little small. Let's scale this up. So if we go back into our chest BP, let's look at our chest top. I got a viewport for this. Yeah, it's a little tiny out there in the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this scale. I'll just lock that, and then I'll just put 3. And when you lock this, it auto scales the other 3 things together. So I'll do the same thing with this. I'll lock the scale there and just do 3 on this one. Make that 3 times the size that it used to be. And now when we drop that in the world, now it's a little bit bigger. And you can grab this little rotation object to rotate that around towards you. And if we just hit play, yeah, now that's a fairly decent sized thing. Now it doesn't have any collision on it. Okay. We want to fix that. So let's go back into our chest BP. And usually for this, you would have to go in here and put collision on. You could do it on the root here, or you could go, sometimes you can go into the mesh itself and put a collision on here. But I think the easy way for our purposes is actually just going to be to put a box around there. Let me just check something real quick. All right, so the easy way to do this is going to be to go into the chest blueprint, and under the chest top, go up here to the details and just type in COL like I did here, and it's going to bring up collision. If you go down to collision presets, this will typically be set to none or whatever. You just want to put this on something like block all, and then you want to do the same thing to chest bottom, just put that on block all also. And all that's just basically doing is just putting it on the collision channel so that this becomes a solid object in the world, that if you were to run into it, it's not going to let you walk through it anymore. Okay, so there's your simple fix for collision on that. With static meshes, you can typically go into the static mesh and set the collision boundaries on there. Now, the other thing we want to do in our chest BP is we want to also add a box that when we overlap that, we can check to see what's happened here. So in our components here, we're going to go back to the chest here, and we'll go add, and this is just called a box collision. We did this in the other one, so we already know that our box collision needs to be scaled up some. So we'll grab that, and we're going to go in here to the scale. Again, this is locked. I'll just do, let's see what 4 looks like. Probably big enough. And then I can just move that up. Now, if you want to see where these are in relationship to each other, see, it's like, you kind of feel like that's right, or this is right, like where should this be? I was just going to kind of put it so that this is on the ground and the rest of it's up further. But it's hard to see that, so I think you can just go in here to perspective and look at this from the front, and then you should be able to see an outline of your chest, and then this is your collision box. So you can just take it in here and zoom in a little bit, and you could figure out whether this is at the ground level or not. So just something simple like this, compile and save. We can go back to perspective again, and now we have our collision box on there. It's big enough, So that'll get that part on there. Okay, so now that we've got our box the right size, we might come back and rescale this because I don't know if maybe I'll need a little bit more room on there. But what we want to do now is go to set up the interaction for this box or anything that has interaction on it. So we would go to our character in Greystone, and in the Greystone character, I don't think we've used the E key yet, but a lot of people use E for interaction because it's pretty close to your WASD keys. So I'm just going to go in here and we'll create keyboard and go down to E. You can also type in keyboard E and it'll just pop this up. And what we want to do is whenever we press this, we want to check and see if we are overlapping anything that we're trying to interact with. And if we can interact with it, then we can call that interact interface. So this kind of will only work if you're overlapping something that you can interact with. That's the idea, is if you walk up to it, you go, I'm going to try and interact with this. And then on the try, you go, can I? And it says, yes, you can, and then it does something. Okay. So on this, we come out of the pressed event, and we're going to say for each loop, and we want to break this every time we hit something that works here. For each loop with a break, and you pull out of the array and say get overlapping actors. Let me just pick this one right here, get overlapping actors. Okay, so now we're going to have an array of this, and then coming out of the array element, we just want to see if this does implement an interface that we're asking it specifically, which one it does. And before I go too much further here, let me just explain, with the concept of this again. For newer users, this is really helpful to understand what's actually happening. So I'm going to hit the E key, and I'm going to see, by looking at this thing of get overlapping actors, I'm just going to check to see if I'm overlapping something. What I want to do is, let's say I'm overlapping multiple things, right? So for everything that I'm overlapping, I have more than one result possible. And anytime you have multiple results, you're basically dealing with an array. And an array is a list or a stack of elements that are of a common nature or whatever. Well, they don't have to be common, but generally they are. Like, so you'll say get an array of every thing that's in the item class of whatever it is you're looking for, or every actor class or whatever. So in here, the array is anything that's an actor, right? So we created an actor, which is a chest. If that was not an actor, which basically the top level of things that you put in the world are basically actors, and then underneath of that they have other subclasses or whatever, if you will, but at their core most of them are actors, right? So I'm just saying, if I'm overlapping anything that's considered to be an actor, get a list of all those things and stick them into something over here called an array. And then what I want to do is, for each item that I'm overlapping in that array, I want to find out if that thing implements an interface, and the interface that I'm looking for is the one that I called interact interface, right? So now this will go back, and for each one of these things, it'll check that, and then it'll return a value and a Boolean here. So the Boolean is a yes or a no. So if I'm overlapping two actors, it'll check the first one. Does it implement the interface? If this is no, it'll go on to the next one. Every time you get done with the loop, you want to go back, you're going to check it, and then loop back. And this will go through that until it runs out of objects to tell you the answer on. Okay, so coming, excuse me, typically with a yes/no, you want to have some type of a path to follow, and normally that's going to be on a branch. So in your flow control branch here, there's a condition that's going to happen if this is true, and then one that's going to happen if it's false. So what we want to do is if the array element implements that interface, if that's true, then what we want to do is we want to take this array element, whatever the thing was that had that condition. So that's what this represents at this moment in time. This changes for every object that it's overlapping, right? The first pass, it's checking to see what it is, and if it has it, right at that moment, that thing is equal to whatever the overlapping actor is that has the implemented interface if this condition is true. I know this is going to, some of you, this might be a little tough, so park right here for a minute, hit pause and think about what's going on here again. And I can't iterate enough, rewind this and understand this fundamental concept of an array, a list of objects, a stack of objects, or whatever. You're sorting through each one of those. If it matches the conditions that you're looking for, which in this case is the implementation of this interface, then go ahead and do something with that. And what the thing is that you would want to do, if this is true, you're going to pull this object off, and you're going to call the interact interface here. You're going to get the interact message, right? So what this is going to do, if that's true, you're going to say, basically, hey, let's go ahead and interact. So I'm going to double click and put a little path node on here just to make this a little cleaner. We'll bring that down. Just trying to clean this up for you so it's easier to see, because I'm going to zoom this back out a little bit, or not zoom it out, but maybe pull these things over some so you can kind of see all this on the screen together. I'm not the best at making these things look pretty, so I apologize in advance. I'm not here to make things look good. Unfortunately, I'm here to try and just make them work for you. So if I press the E key, and I'm telling the system, since I'm pressing the E key, I'm trying to find out if I can interact with this thing. So get me a list of all the stuff I'm overlapping. If that meets my condition, go ahead and call the interact. When I get done calling that interact, what I really want to do is move on to the next thing. So I can come down here. Whoops, not way down there. And I can come, just put it over here and go back into this break again, so it continues to execute that code. And again, I'm just double left clicking there to put these reroute nodes on here. So I'm going to try and make this so that, again, it looks a little bit cleaner. These nodes sometimes are really, really hard to to pretty up. I apologize, man. These things are, there you go. Maybe that'll look a little bit better anyway. We can see it this way. All right, so just understand that this is just looping through, loop, 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 loop until it matches your condition. Okay. Hopefully you can see that on your screen well enough to absorb it. Okay. Always compile and save. Okay, so let's go out in the world now and see what the results of all that are. So if we go out here and hit play, I'll blow this up a little bit. Now I'm hitting the E key over here. Nothing's happening, right? I'm going to walk up to the chest and hit the E key, and voila. Now we only wanted it to play once. But see, that's the funny part about this animation, actually. See, I can't run that again. But what it did is it opened and then it closed again, because that animation actually has two parts to it in the loop. So we can fix that with a thing called a timeline. That's a different lesson I had planned for here, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. The meat and the potatoes of this is that it opened when we interacted with it. and then the animation continued to play off into that. So there are a couple ways we can fix that real quick without going into the entire lesson that I was planning for timelines. An easy thing we could do is, remember we had our chest anim top. So if we go and we look at that, that's the actual skeletal mesh. There's an animation here called chest anim top. If we open this up, right, so there's our timeline kind of goes through here and says, you know, we start closed, we come over here, and there we are fully open. With that fully open state right there, when we're done with that, what you technically could do is you could make a duplicate of this. Excuse me, you make a duplicate of this, so I'm going to go in here and just say duplicate, and I'm going to say chest underscore anim underscore open only. Okay. And in the one for the chest anim open only, what I'll do is I'll go to where that's actually open. Right there, roughly. And if you right click on this, there's a spot in here to remove frames. So it says remove frame 0 to frame 33 or remove frame 34 to 101. I'm going to pick the back half of this, remove frame 34 to 101. And so now my animation when I play it will just be that it goes to the open state. There is no close animation now. Technically, this animation could have been played forward to open it and backwards to close it, you know. And again, you can do all these with timelines, which we'll talk about later on. That's rotating around, so I actually want to find out where that's going to live. So I kind of want it to stop like maybe right there. You'll have to play with this. I'll just do this, just remove that last frame there. But you'll get it close. I mean, again, this is just a visual. I don't know why it has that last little piece on it, but okay, we'll save that. Now we have chest anim open only. So that means that we have to go back into our chest BP and into this event graph where we had our event action here. When we play this one here, we just want to say, I'll just type in the word only because we know we only have that one that does that. And we'll just change it to only be that one. Now when we go back out here and play it again, walk up to the chest, hit the E key. Oh, so it goes back to a closed state anyway. Interesting. Well, again, not the point of this whole thing, but you get the idea about the way that it opens it up because we interacted with it. And I can hit this E key a million times, and I can't interact with it anymore because my interaction's already fired. Okay, so now another thing we can do with this is we want to go back. Let me just check something real quick again. And I think what I want to explain is what's going on here is it's animating that first frame. And I put that partial animation on it. But what it is it plays the animation, and when the animation is done, it just goes back to its original state because we don't have anything in there telling it to go to a frame of I'm now open. And what I mean by that is that there's nothing controlling the logic on that, though. Again, with the timeline, when we go into timelines, we'll fix this. Maybe I'll leave this here until then. We'll come back and we'll fix it as part of that lesson, which I'll probably have to move into a sooner slot now that we're talking about this. All right, so the other thing that a lot of times that you'll do with these types of objects too, let's go back to the chest. Last kind of piece of this is normally when you go in and you want to have an interaction with something, you kind of want to tell the character that, hey, you can probably interact with us. And you can do this to a whole bunch of things. Commonly, it's just a text box. It could be an icon that pops up. You know, it could be any of that kind of stuff. Different ways to do it. But in this case here, we'll just go in and just say we want to put text on there. So I'm going to say add text render. And just pull this up so that it's above the thing here. And the text here, we're just going to say press, in our case, E to interact. I keep putting an E on the end of that. So press E to interact. And I think in here, in your horizontal alignment, you can just put center on there. So it'll just be right over top of the component. And what you want to do now is with that text renderer, there's a thing in almost everything I've seen in Unreal Engine so far where you can go in here and look up hidden in game. So we're going to leave this so that it's hidden in game. And then what we want to do is we want to turn it off and on based on our character's position or distance from this or whatever. And in our case, it's not going to be the distance, but it's going to be whether they've overlapped this trigger or not. So if you hover on the box, there's an event panel down here at the bottom like we talked about in the other one that we did. And there's two that we want to get. One is on component begin overlap, or on, let's see, which one do I want? On, we'll just do it this one. We'll do on begin overlap. And then we'll hit the box again and do on end overlap. And so now we have our two events. And all we're going to do is just say whenever this is overlapped, we're basically going to take this text render and set hidden in game. And we're going to say hidden in game right now is already true. We're going to set hidden in game to false if you've overlapped that box. And then when you walk away from the box, Control C. I'm just highlighting this in Control C. I'm going to come over here and hit Control V because we're going to do the exact opposite when you walk away from it. We're going to check that on. This is a Boolean, so true or false, right? Checkbox means yes. So yes, I want it to be hidden. Over here, no, I do not want it to be hidden. And that's going to happen whenever you leave. Now, normally you have to get and check and see if there's another actor in here. I believe you might have to do that with this as well. So to do that, you just go over here. I'm going to drag these back just a hair. And you usually just say on the other actor, you say cast to, and in this case, it's the Greystone player character. And if that is the thing that we've overlapped with, so we'll just wire it up this way. We cast a third-person character. So if the other actor that we've overlapped with is our Greystone player character, then we want to set hidden in game false for the text render. And the same thing down here, we would just cast to, you could copy this to, cast a Greystone player character. And again, if he is the other actor, then we want to set the hidden in game back to true. Compile and save, and now you see our interact over here. So when we hit play, we can't see the interaction. We walk up to the box, and when we get, within our tripping over that wire there for the box for the interaction, or for the collision, we see the press E to interact. We hit E, and our box opens up, and then immediately closes because we don't have that on timeline. So I can walk away from that, and it'll go away. So this is a real easy way. Again, hey, look, I've gotten close enough to interact with something. I'm hitting the E key to find out if I can interact with it, and go through that whole process. So I'm going to show you something too. I probably showed this to you before, but if I didn't, this is really super helpful for newer users as well. We have this E key press event in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and highlight this. I'm in my Greystone player character. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say toggle breakpoint. Okay. And we're going to go back out here now. And when I walk over here and I hit my E key to interact, this is going to break the code and come down here. That's what this pause is for. So I've hit the E key at this point. Now, if I use the buttons to go through here, there's little buttons over here. You can go, and I'm just going to hit the F11 key because this is right here, step out to the next node to be executed. That's Alt-Shift-11. This one is step into the next node to be executed. So that's F11. So what it does, it says for each loop with a break, create that array, and then it's just going to go through this and init the loop counter and the array counter. I'm just hitting F11. It came down here and it went to this branch. It found out that condition must have been true, because if it was true, it went to this interact. And then, it comes up here and fires the event interact on the chest. I'm in the chest BP now. It hits the event interact. It says, do this one time. Right? Go in here. Close on first entrance if desired. Boom. Play the animation. Play this animation. Go to the next element, my array. And what you find out is there is no other element in the array. So the array's over and it exits out at the back end of the standard macro execution. Okay? So that's an easy way to step through this code and see if something happened. You could also, instead of stepping through the code like that, I could just fire this event interact. I could put a toggle breakpoint on there. And I could come back out, and when I hit play, let's pause that, I hit play. I come over here again. I can interact. I'm going to hit my E key. Now it'll stop here. But what I want to do is I want to go and say play on to the next one. So I hit play, and it fires it passed all that other code. So basically it ran through all this kind of stuff, went through the branches and the loops and everything. And the next place I wanted it to stop was if it actually hits the event interact. So by hitting that, it just resumes. See, it says resume play. It just resumes play until it has to get stopped again by this event. Okay? And you can do this to troubleshoot a lot of things. You could go back to this loop counter and this array thing and this loop body. You could put a message output that says, what is the thing that I'm overlapping? You could have this array element, get a message for you up here. And then it would just loop through this, and you might want to troubleshoot and see all those things. When you're done with your troubleshooting, instead of having to go back here and go right click on here and remove breakpoint and this, that, and the other thing, there's a thing in the debug window that says disable all breakpoints. And so if you're in a window, you just go up here and just disable all breakpoints within this. And so I could have had, a toggle breakpoint on here and a toggle breakpoint on here and on this one. I could have toggle breakpoints everywhere. But if I just go to debug, right, I can say disable all breakpoints, shuts them all off. I can go back individually and turn them back on. I could go to debug and say enable all breakpoints, and it'll stop at every one of these, right? So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in here and remove the breakpoints. And again, these are your friends for troubleshooting and stepping through code to see exactly what's happening. I've had so many times where I've gone into somebody else's system, and it'll, I'll walk up to a thing and it'll say hit the E key to interact, and okay, well, how did all that work? I don't understand. So I would go into the character and look for, the E key event. Go find the E key event, and once I found the E key event, then I could step through the code. I'd break it and watch what it was doing to understand the logic of this, and you just kind of have to go through that process for yourself to get that all to work out. So, hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Again, I've belabored some of these things a couple times over and over and over again to talk about what it is that's going on in here, but it's super, super important that you understand these fundamentals. If we're going to try and make this RPG, this even a simple little thing, we're going to go kill that dragon, there's going to be a chest there, we got to be able to open that chest up and get our loot, So that's a fundamental thing. And that's what I'm trying to teach in this series of videos is the fundamental coding and blueprinting that you will need. Maybe that's a new word I'm going to use, blueprinting, instead of coding. I always call it coding, but really blueprinting is probably the better term. I may have invented that term. I don't know. Check the internet and let me know. But when you're blueprinting these things out, what you want to do is make sure that you have the fundamentals of whatever it is that you're going to do all hashed out, and you understand these, because you're going to use the same stuff over and over and over and over again in every one of your things that you make down the road. All right, so that'll wrap it up for tonight. Again, this is doing an interaction interface. And in the next episode, what we'll do is we'll come back in and we'll talk about timelines and maybe just bypass the animation altogether and manually animate, quote unquote, animate the opening position of the lid. To give you a little sneak preview of that, what we'll do is in the chest BP, in the viewport there, you have that chest top, remember? Well, these things have rotation values in them, right? So if I change these rotation values That one moves it side to side. Right, this one moves it back that way. Right, so let me zero that out. And then this one here gives you a side-to-side rotation. So what we may end up being able to do is, through just some basic rotation here, we may be able to slide this lid back, but also at the same time it would be, oops, it would be like up here and in. You know, we set these values here, and we could create the illusion potentially of actually having this like open or close across a pivot. But we'll get into that if that's how we have to do it. There's also ways, like I said, just to call portions of the animation and use them in the timeline. So we'll come up with a method that'll actually work for us, and we'll do that in an upcoming video. Thank you guys again for watching. My name's TC Mabe. Hopefully these videos are helping you guys. If you happen to like what you're finding here, please feel free to like, follow, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. And I'll be trying to get these out as soon as I can. You guys have a great night, and thanks again. Take care.